Welcome to a new episode of On the Spot Review. This might be a slightly longer video than I usually put out, and that is because I will be talking about movies directed by Miyazaki. I have watched all the movies that he directed except for a Lupin the Third movie he did, and I think it was either a music video or a short film he directed that I did not get to see. But I watched all the major movies that he has directed. Um, I've also watched them dubbed, so my experience with these movies are all in English. I did not see it subbed, so it is what it is. So the reason why I kind of have this itch to rewatch or at least watch all these movies is because I did technically watch his movies when I was a kid, like when I was 6 years old, 5 years old, 7 years old, whatever. But at that age, I never really appreciated a lot of like storytelling and this and that. I really had like very um, weak attention span at that age. I mean, it wasn't like super bad, but it wasn't enough to hold through a long movie like his. So a lot of times I would fall asleep during them. Like I know my neighbor Totoro comes to mind. That was one of the movies I slept through. I remember the little girl going to the woods, and that was it. And then I also remember seeing a little bit of Princess Mononoke, but I only saw like the forest. What are they called? Um, they're also in Neo. I don't know. Kadamas. Jeez, Kadamas. I remember seeing the Kadamas in Princess Mononoke, and that was it. I think I also saw um, that girl that's like Princess of the Wolves or whatever. I saw her wear the mask, and that was it. So I didn't really see a lot of that movie either. So the only movie growing up that I saw from start to finish was Howl's Moving Castle. And I also saw Kiki's Delivery Service, but that movie I kept missing. Because every time that it would air, Tenchi Universe would be on at the same time. And it's like, yeah, I'm gonna go watch Tenchi Universe instead. So it was a very rough time for Kiki to get me to watch it. But the other movie I saw fully was The Wind Rises. So since then, I always wanted to go back. I saw Nausicaa and Prince of Mononoke since, but when I was rewatching these movies recently, I rewatched those as well. So let's get right into it. I'm going to start off with what I think is the weakest film that Miyazaki has directed, and that is Howl's Moving Castle. I don't think it's a bad movie, so don't get me wrong. Just because I say it's the weakest, I don't mean it's a bad movie, but I think it's a movie that has a lot of had a lot of good potential, a lot of good intentions and characters, and had a good like idea for a story. The reason why I think it's a weak movie from him is it felt way too packed. It felt like there was way too much stuff going on, and the story didn't really delve into it because it starts off as this whole thing with Sophie. She gets cursed by this witch, so then she ventures out to find a wizard or warlock or whoever to lift the curse. So that's like okay, that's a solid storyline. Okay, he has and then she runs into to Howl, and that's fine. I thought it was just gonna be focusing on these two and them trying to find a cure for her, etc. And then it kind of leads to this issue with Calcifer that he wants to be lifted from this curse that he has as well. Then it goes to these warring factions because a prince has gone missing, and these are like cool conflicts. And then you see like Howl has different identities or aliases that he uses, but all these kind of either get dropped. Like the multiple aliases that he has eventually led to him like being called forth by two warring sections, and he didn't want to go to either. But the other section that was also demanding his attention, that gets dropped immediately. The whole thing with the evil witch kind of gets left behind. It's still there, but it's not as strong as the premise would have you believe. Again, I know that Howl's Moving Castle is also an adaptation from the book, and I think the way you could see the movie is it might just be a good like commercial for the book. I mean I know that's kind of like a shitty thing to say for a movie, but you see all these interesting characters and stories. I think by the end of the movie, you would probably want to read the book, and I think it does a good job getting people more invested in picking up the book than they were to watch the movie. I think there's more benefit of reading the book from what the movie had to offered. The animation is really solid. I think it really shows a lot of the talent that Miyazaki has. There's a lot of cool hand-drawn animation. The action scenes are good. That Howl's castle design is so wild, and I love the design. I think the whole castle was just such a cool set piece to have that can be in multiple locations. And there's one location, you see this big like walking tower. So I do like a lot of that. The other issue I had with Howl's Moving Castle is uh, I don't really think they established Sophie's curse very well, or the at least like the rules of that curse, because initially there's a scene where she's talking to one of the governments that wanted Howl to fight for them, and as she's like trying to give them an excuse for like why he can't show up or whatever, she turns young again, and the person she's talking to like notes like, oh, you must love Howl or something. So I was like, okay, so she must be like changing like from an old lady to be young, under like love, maybe like these emotions of love or these or just emotions or whatever can like change her back to being normal for a set period of time or whatever. But there are so many times in this movie that she just turns young and old like this as if it's nothing. Like, is this kind of like a thing she wants to do? So it wasn't clear how that curse necessarily works or the rules that it's confined to. And I feel like maybe the book probably explored that a little bit more and elaborated, but the movie just kind of did it and didn't really elaborate as to why it was changing in some parts. I can only assume it might just be an emotional thing, like she might be young at heart in certain scenes, and maybe that's why. But I mean, it's kind of a weird thing to get into because then it's like, well, then she could just feel young all the time and be young. I mean, it just it just has this weird rule to it that I don't think it ever really explained very well. So that's my opinion on Howl's Moving Castle. I think it's a weak movie that is held back by a lot of crammed conflicts and story. Another film from Miyazaki that I think not necessarily is the weakest, but I don't think is as interesting as his other films is Castle in the Sky. You look at his other films, his other body of work, they always have some commentary or some theme going on. Castle in the Sky, to me, comes off more on of a very good adventure film. I think it does a good job giving these characters an adventure, having this action, these high stakes kind of stuff, and the story. Sure, you could say that it's a simple story that doesn't really break the mold. However, I think it allowed the story to really flesh out the characters. It's like I've said in other reviews. If you make a story that's simple and you have like a story that can go from start to finish in a very digestible way, that's just straightforward, that would allow you to really have interesting characters and worlds, and allows you to really build those characters up if you're just telling a simple story from start to finish. And I think that is well resembled within the pirates, the villain. Even though the villain is voiced by Mark Hamill, which does a very good job selling how evil he is, he's more akin to Fire Lord Ozai from Last Airbender. They're both interesting villains. They do a good job kind of making you dislike them, but they're very surface level to some degree. They're just kind of generic. Like they're there to be evil. Though I would kind of argue that I think the villain in Castle in the Sky I think is a little bit more interesting than Fire Lord Ozai. I like a lot of stuff that he was doing with the other governments, kind of pitting them against each other, all that kind of stuff. I loved how sneaky he was. While Fire Lord Ozai was just kind of a one note villain that does a good job for what he is. But I think the villain in Castle in the Sky is a little bit better, but he's still kind of a simple villain to understand. The characters I do think that really prove the most that this film has a great sense of character is the pirates. A lot of shows that are directed for kids or families, you always take a pirate and say, well, he's now redeemed. He changed now. Like after this adventure with the hero, he's now reformed and he's not going to steal ever again or whatever. They always do some kind of nonsense like that. This film gives you these pirates, and they're like, yeah, they're not gonna fucking change. They're still pirates at the end of the day, and that I liked. I like that they did not have these characters compromise who they are to benefit the story or to make you like them or whatever. They're likable in their own way because they're so like goofy and uplifting, and I think they had a very strong sense of family than honestly where these other characters really come from. Not to say that the boy. I really cannot remember the names, unfortunately. But the one of the main characters, the boy that travels with the girl. Sorry again. Sorry, I forgot their names. Um, the boy's family sure is lovely, but you don't really get to see them really do anything, so you don't really know how great or bad they are. But I feel like that the pirates are kind of the family unit that these kids are stuck with as they go through their adventures. And I like that all these other pirates have this very strong like unity with their mother. That is, like some Western shows, they always have like the family be they love each other at the end of the day, sure, but they always have something. They always bicker. They always like kind of like shit on each other or whatever. But you have like this family unit in Castle in the Sky that is just this goofy like thing that goes on. So I love the pirates in this movie. I think that was like one of the strong suits, other than the art direction. I think Castle in the Sky, if I'm not mistaken, was Miyazaki's second or third film. I know this was like either right after Nausicaa or before, but Castle in the Sky has a very good sense of art direction. I love the animation and the design of the robots in the Castle that's in the Sky had such a cool design, and it was giving me like vibes of Breath of the Wild a little bit. Like I was thinking about that a lot when this movie was going on. Like this very civilized civilization has decided to uh, leave it to live on Earth, and they left kind of all this fauna to grow and take root, while the main villain wanted to kind of reconquer it and kind of use it to take over the world. But I do like that it had this kind of this. It was kind of a sad state what you saw. Like it was kind of sad to see this civilization kind of like be abandoned, but it wasn't like, oh yeah, they were wiped out. It was just like, no, they decided to leave, and it was like, it was like a positive spin of what you were expecting. But I do like that it had this rich environment that was like that got your mind racing, and I think that's kind of like the genesis of Miyazaki's films, or just kind of the core is that he puts some stuff in its environments that just keeps your mind racing and thinking, oh, what does this mean, or whatever. Even though Castle in the Sky may not have been his most deepest film, it had a lot of stuff in it that was just visually interesting that your brain would just kind of think of, even after the fact. So I think Castle in the Sky was a very strong film from Miyazaki in his earlier era. Being one of his second or third films, I think it was a very good start to his career, and his animation did not feel dated at all at this time. I mean, you look at Disney animated films, you can definitely tell, they're good. Don't get me wrong. Like you look at Lion King, Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, they look great. They still look good. Now, but you can definitely tell that these movies were done years and years ago, in the '80s or '90s, etc. Like you can definitely kind of feel what time period they come from. While I think with Miyazaki's films, they all feel like they've been made this year or like, this century, decade, or whatever. They're so like timeless visually because there's so much going on. It is wild to see a movie that was done like that was a second or third movie that has so much stuff going on visually. It is insane because animation is one of the most expensive fields of media that you could have, and he was able to get this animation to look that gorgeous. It is like insane how great Castle in the Sky looks. Ponyo is one of the films that I kind of thought had a very mixed reaction to. I felt that I went in thinking I was gonna dislike Ponyo or I was not gonna like it, but I was pleasantly surprised. Really, how much I ended up enjoying Ponyo as a film. I think it has a lot of good, commentary themes with overpopulation, like environment, all that kind of stuff, pollution, um, balance, all that kind of stuff. And I really liked a lot of that going in. I liked Ponu's father as a character. He was, sure he hated humans, and he was kind of portrayed as an antagonist. But the one thing that is true, or at least interesting with most Miyazaki films, that there's no true typical villain. He always tries to have this interesting spin with the antagonist that makes it a little bit more interesting, and you see that with Ponu's father, where he isn't, mean spirited. He's not like a guy that's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna fucking fuck shit up. It was interesting to see that this guy was more about the balance of what's going on in the world and all this kind of stuff, keeping things in check. So seeing as that how Ponyo is this like chaotic element that once she escaped her father and slowly started to evolve a little bit, she's you start to see that she's starting to have this conflict of like I might have to lose my magic abilities to be with. Oh my god, why am I forgetting? I forget so many names in his movies. But the main boy that she's with, that she wants to be with, um, Lisa's son. I mean, I guess I could call him Lisa's son. That way it'd be a little more specific. Uh, she forms this bond with him, and this kind of leads to a bigger conflict where she's gonna have to make a decision either to keep her magic and not be with him, or be with him and not be magic anymore. It has this good like it's a good romantic plot that's not the focus. Like it's there, but it's not like the crutch of the movie. It's more about like things are going out of balance, and we need to get back into balance as this movie goes on. And it's this constant buildup of chaotic stuff going on. The waves are getting bigger, things are getting flooded, and all this kind of shit. And it's interesting to see how this all builds up. And Lisa was a very good. Is an interesting character for a pretty much single mom. I mean, the dad was always away, and you never really see the dad kind of with the family until the end. The only thing that I think with Ponyo that I kind of I don't know how I feel about it. Like it's kind of it's a silly criticism, but it's one that uh it held the movie back for me a little bit. So by the end, Lisa's son and Ponyo are off to try to find the mom, Lisa, and trying to get to the retirement home. The retirement home's underwater. It's protected by this barrier, whatever. And you see these old ladies running around, and like, wow, this is amazing. And the whole scene, it feels like that they're all brainwashed. Like they're all like on drugs or something. Like they're just like, yeah, this is amazing. They're talking about rebirth. They're talking about starting anew and all this stuff that like sounds weird to be like, yeah, man, starting anew. Like, what does that really mean? And then you have like Lisa that's talking to like Ponyo's mother, and the elderly ladies are like kind of separated from them. So I'm thinking, seeing this, that is she like isolated in like a barrier or something? Like, is something sinister going on? Like it's portrayed very weirdly. And then when Ponyo and Lisa's son make it to the retirement home area, the one of the grumpy old ladies was like, "Oh, don't go down there. Don't follow that. What that man says. He fooled everyone. This and that." And it's like, okay, so is something bad going on? And by the end, it's like, no, they just had to decide, is Ponyo going to be a human or not? And they decide that she wants to be a human, etc. So they made that decision, and that was it. And I was like, so why did everything before that seem so ominous to me? Like it felt like that the story was supposed to go a different way, and they were supposed to be the villains. Like Ponyo's parents were supposed to be villains. And then I think, maybe they had trouble coming to an end where it's like, yeah, how does the ending work? This might not be a good ending, and it might not be clean, and it might be rushed, whatever. Like, I think the ending felt really lame initially, so they changed it to be what it was. That worked better. But they didn't change that scene where it seemed that everyone was like brainwashed almost. So it was a very weird ending and scene leading to that ending, but overall, the film was really good. I don't know why I thought I was gonna hate it or that it was a bad movie. The only thing I could think of was that at that time, I was when this movie was in theaters. This was one of the films that I was trying to catch in theaters, but for some reason, it never really, came to be. I never really caught a chance to catch it in theaters. But I watched out of all the reviews to watch, right? I watched the Nostalgia Critic's review of this film, and I do want to talk about his review a little bit because I don't remember all of it, and I don't really have any intention to rewatching it because the one thing that I remember with it that was really dumb now that I watched the movie was he complained about the son being like obnoxious and shit, and I was like, the kid, it's a kid, like what? And then like he complained about the mom speeding on the road and all this. It's like the mom has a lot of shit going on and it's an anime and it's a Miyazaki film. Like it's supposed to be like this kind of wacky stuff going on. Like it's fine. Like it wasn't a major issue. Now I know some people might say, and he said this before, that a lot of his criticisms are part of the character. Like he exaggerates some of the criticisms that sure. Sure, I can understand that. He's playing a character as the nostalgia critic, but it's such a weird thing to kind of even mention in that kind of regard anyway. Like I don't know, it just I feel like with that you should be criticizing actual criticisms and maybe portraying that over the top than stuff that just feels more nitpicky than what's it's just a weird thing to say. So that stood out to me when I was watching the movie. I was like, yeah, I don't really care about watching his review to even know what he said about the ending. I have a feeling he didn't like the ending either, but I don't really give a shit. I mean, that movie was good for for what it is. I think Pony was more of a film that was for a younger audience, and it does a good job kind of staying with that tone. So I think overall the movie is a solid film. I liked it more than I thought I would. So that was really good. It has a good animation, good music, great characters. So Ponyo really surprised me as a film going into it. Nausicaa was a film I watched earlier this year, and then I decided to rewatch it when I was going through these Miyazaki films. And I know it's one of his earlier films because I think it was either second or third, depending on where it is from Castle in the Sky. Because I know they both have that fox squirrel character. I think I would like to say that Nazca was the second and Castle in the Sky was the third, but I might be wrong with that order. But the point is, Nausicaa is a very strong film. I think it's really one of his strongest films because it has a character that is a true pacifist. You have all these other movies, films, whatever, that tries to have a character that is anti-violence and all that, but they always try to give them some kind of reason or justification for fighting, and it's always weak and always kind of it muddles the movie. While Nausicaa really holds strong with its themes and its story and the character. The Nausicaa is a pacifist after a point in that movie, and it's consistent throughout. You don't see her compromising her beliefs. Sure, there's scenes where she might be threatening Akira to do what she kind of wants them to do to cooperate, but she's been driven organically to do that, and it's not like out of malice either. And it's not like she's gonna intentionally kill these characters, but she's doing something that she knows that would get them to cooperate. So it's a little more cunning in that scene than, oh yeah, she's gonna say fuck it, I'm gonna kill you, dude. It was more like of a cunning decision that she tricked them into, which is like smart. They have this main character that is a genius, like a smart character. She has tried to manufacture a cure of the toxic jungle that is infested the world. So you have this strong character going on, and that's not even the only strength that this movie has. It doesn't have a traditional villain. Now, of course, I've said this before, but Miyazaki has a lot of villains that are not traditional. They're not the traditional mustache-twirling villain, and they're not inherently evil. In this movie, Nausicaa, they have a female general that is just trying to unite the world so the world does not bicker and infight with themselves, that they're all unified under one ruler and they can go against the toxic jungle, etc. That's like her whole intention. And then you have this other faction that has weaponized the Oma, or the Ohm. I think it's just called the Ohm, and they've used them to be weapons almost to annihilate their enemies. But they're only doing that to kind of push off this force that's trying to conquer the world. So it's this interesting conflict that's not innately evil. They have bad, they have good intentions in their own way, but they have bad means. The means are not justified, and they're not great means either. They have this like nuanced take on these villains that are not super evil, like the woman general that tries to unify everyone. Like she wasn't innately trying to kill Nausicaa, and she didn't want to. Like she was like, no, she should just see what I'm trying to do so she can understand it. These people just don't understand what I'm trying to do. And then you have this warring faction. Like, look, you don't understand. She's fucking crazy. She's trying to take over the world, Nausicaa, and we're just doing the best to push her off. And you have her that's like, no, you guys need to shut up and just stop. You don't understand. And then she gets enveloped with the toxic jungle and she starts to understand that toxic jungle is just a byproduct of the forest healing itself. They're trying to kind of restart life and all this other stuff. And that's what the Ohm are as a product as well. And you also find out that if you kill the Ohm, or, once the Ohm is enraged and they stay enraged, once they die, the toxic jungle starts to grow from their corpses. So it's this interesting like ecosystem of stuff that goes on, and it goes into this theme of hate that is also shown in another movie, which we'll get into later. But Nausicaa does a great job showing all the stuff that just builds up, and it comes off so well. Like I think, Nausicaa does a very good job showing rising action. You see this conflict brewing, and in the beginning you're just like, okay, this is going on. Oh shit! And you get this like these little breadcrumbs and these strings, and when you start to connect, you're just like, oh shit, shit's gonna go down, and then shit goes down. You're just like, what? Oh shit! And I think the thing I love the most out of it, aside from Nausicaa's character and her and the love that she has with the Ohm. I mean that is just a touching scene. How much he loves the Ohm and how much he was willing to really put herself in danger for them. But the other thing I loved about it was the Titans, these gigantic beings that set the world ablaze. And there was one that was like asleep that they were trying to kind of wake, and they woken it up too prematurely, and it was just a globbling mess of a thing that was just killing indiscriminately almost, and they couldn't control it. And I think what is interesting with that is when I first watched it, and I kind of was seeing it even on my second viewing, is that it was clear that the Titans was kind of a allegory or symbolism of nuclear weapons. I think it was this kind of saying that if one nation had this superpower, it's a devastating power to have. That is not like one that you want to have go wild and go willy nilly. Like it has these big consequences to it if it's misused. And I think that's really one of Nausicaa's strengths that does a very good job showing just how dangerous having these powers can be. And, in the hands of someone that always feels like that what they're doing is right, who knows how right it could be. I mean, these things that these people that both sides had were devastating consequences. Like the Ohm, weaponizing the Ohm would wipe out nations and civilizations, while the other would just annihilate existence almost. So this cool like conflict going on, and Nausicaa's like right in between of that. And then you have the toxic jungle that's doing its own thing as well. So it's interesting to see all of this stuff kind of come together in this film, and it's interesting. Like it keeps you guessing, and the fact that none of the villains are traditional villains. You never know where this movie's gonna go. You just don't know how it's gonna end. And as soon as it seemingly has gonna have a depressing ending, has an uplifting ending where it kind of gives you the sense of hope. Like, yeah, all this should happen, but there's still hope for humanity. The toxic jungle might not be a forever thing, and we might be able to re-inhabit that forest again once what it's doing is done. We just have to wait it out. And I do like that it has this kind of um, ending to it, that it wasn't a downer ending, and it didn't end on oh, the bad guys got their comeuppance. It was like, no, no, we'll see what happens. We just have to calm down for a sec. So I do like Notice a lot for that, and a lot of stuff that it had to say. I think is really one of Miyazaki's strongest films that he put out. Princess Mononoke was one of the movies I was eager to rewatch because I have a Blu-ray of it, and I feel like the Blu-ray copy of Princess Mononoke I had, they fucked with the audio. I feel like the dialogue was very quiet and everything else was loud, so I had a hard time hearing anyone talk. When the wolf mom, I think it was like Mara. I can't remember her name. The wolf. When every time she would talk, I would be like, "What?" And when I tried to put on subs, the subs were obviously pertaining to the Japanese version of the movie. And I was like, okay, so the subs kind of offered me nothing. So I turned them off. I had turned the volume up to 60 at that time. So when I rewatched it, they got the audio balance perfect. I don't know what it was. Because I think it was initially put out by Disney, and then G Kids, I think is what it's called, or G Studio, redistributed it again, and I think they probably touched it up again and fixed the audio, so they did a better job with it than the previous studio did, I guess. But anyways, Prince Mononoke, to some degree, I feel it retreaded a lot of what Nazca was doing in the sense of war and the relationship with man, animals, and nature. However, I think that it delved more with the emotion of hate. I think it took what Nazca did and just kind of used it as a vehicle to go into hate, because Nazca didn't really get into a lot of hate or that emotion with it. It kind of dealt with the relationship with nations and all that kind of stuff, while Princess Mononoke is more of the emotion of hate and how toxic and poisonous it can be. Ironically, being it's 2020 and right now is August. Last of Us Part 2 came out, and it was trying to teach us about how toxic and powerful hate is, and though it kind of gets that, it fumbled it by the end. Princess Mononoke does a very strong job with showing the extent of how strong hate can be, and how it can infect people, and how it's like a poison and a curse that you can never really cure. They say, oh well, you can kind of put it off or whatever, but you're never gonna cure yourself of it. I mean, it gets to the point where I think, man, I know the name starts with an A, and it's like it's a weird name, and I can't remember it. But he gets infected by the hate. By the hate. He gets infected by the curse that was infecting one of the pig characters, and he goes off to try to find a cure, or the forest spirit, to kind of, in hopes that the forest spirit was going to cure him. And when he finally meets it for the first time, the forest spirit doesn't cure the character of it, and he's kind of doomed to fall victim to it. So as he's doing this, he gets thrown into this conflict with the forest tribes of the wolves and all this, and the animals and all this stuff, and this Iron Kingdom that is making weapons that is meant to destroy the animal kingdom and kind of expand their territory to it. And it shows all this hate that's going on, and it layers it with these other animals. Like, the main character gets enveloped with the wolves, and you see that the wolves are also arguing with these monkeys that are wanting to go to war with the humans, and they're like, no, look, we just need to fight them off. We don't need to kill the humans. We just need to push them off. I mean, we don't need to stoop to their level. And the monkeys are like, no, look, we've been replanting the trees. They need to die, and this and that. So there's this ingoing arguments within even the animal kingdoms you see. And I think, and that's really what this movie does a lot of. It shows a lot of hate and the cycle that goes on, and it expands and grows. And sure, Princess Mononoke wants to go off and kill the humans that are in the Iron Kingdom because they've done so much harm. They've killed so much, and she wants them to uh get their own medicine, etc. And the main character that you see follow this is like, no, look, you need to calm down. No one needs to die. We just the hate has to stop. And he's not picking a side, but he's trying to push them off. And this is another film that doesn't have a generic villain. It's not traditional because the people of the Ironworks, the leader of that group, liberated these people. All the women that are there used to work in brothels. They were prostitutes. They didn't have a good living in the capital. All this stuff, and this woman liberated them. It's like, look, you don't need to listen to that. Live with them. You're valued here, but what they were doing was also at the expense of nature and the forest as well, and the wolves and these other animals and the pigs and all this other shit. And it's not traditional in that sense. There's no clear cut like this is the villain. You hate him, and even Billy Bob Thornton's character. Sure, he is like this conniving character that just wanted the head of the forest spirit, to bring back for immortality. He later, by the end, is like, yeah, I don't think we need to do this anymore. It is what it is, and he kind of comes to terms because he was only doing that for the fame and fortune, which is not. It's not necessarily an evil pursuit, but it is a pursuit that led to a lot of evil out of it. So I guess you would argue that he's technically the traditional villain of the movie, but he wasn't one that you never saw. He never really got a true comeuppance, unless you consider like him losing the bounty he had. But he wasn't really one that really had a lot of malice to it. He wasn't doing stuff that was intentionally like, yeah, let's fuck shit up, fuck him. He was just like, hey, I get a paycheck, and that's kind of what he is. And that's not necessarily an evil motive. It's like, hey, people do things for paychecks all the time. Um, the animation, the artwork is, as always, top notch. And a lot of people might not like the dub. I think dub is really strong for what it is. It does a good job with the material. It delves into a lot of the themes very well, and I just loved watching it. I love the characters. I love how I didn't know where it was gonna go, and it really showing how poisonous hate can be is such a strong thing to show. Like they have this pig succumb to that curse, and when Mononoke was trying to tell the pig like, look, you need to stop. That's not your tribe, and this and that. He gets enveloped with this hatred that she gets brought into it, and she starts to see like she was another character that felt such strong hatred for the humans, and once she gets enveloped with this hatred, she sees how hurtful and toxic it is. She starts kind of like saying, "Oh my God, we have to stop this violence, etc." And even by the end, she's like, "Look, I don't like the humans, and I still hate them, but yeah, I don't think I'm gonna go off and killing people anymore. It's just they need to know that they need to leave us alone and all this kind of stuff." And I do like that it comes to that ending where it's like she doesn't compromise. She learns and she adapts, but she doesn't compromise what she believes in. And I think that's a lot of shows and movies, and I've said this again with Nausicaa. They kind of weak out. They kind of drop. They kind of back out of what they want to have with these characters, and they don't own it. Prince Mononoke owned this character. Owned. Yeah, I isolate the humans. I'm not gonna change because these people are just gonna keep growing their territory, and they don't even give a shit. Why would I change my mind? They have not changed mine. Whatever. They haven't really proven to her that they changed their relationship with the forest. They have to really kind of earn it, and they don't really compromise her motivation for that. Though the character and the main character, the guy I can't remember the name of, he understands that it's like, yeah, look, keep visiting you from time to time. I mean, I'm not gonna just abandon you either. And he's kind of like, to a point, a liaison for these two groups. And I think that is what really uh, is needed for these kind of situations. And that's what I liked about Princess Mononoke. It dealt with a lot of stuff that I think no show or movie knows how to handle it. It's because to a degree you could argue that the animals, like the pigs, the wolves, the apes, all that are all persecuted individuals in that world. Like, these humans kind of kill them indiscriminately, and they see them kind of lesser, and they also see them lesser too. It's this hatred on both sides, but at the same time, like, you see that this hatred that is constant, and the movie shows you that both sides are never gonna necessarily see eye to eye, and they're not gonna necessarily like back down for each other. But it ends with this message of hope that maybe in the future they're gonna mend their ways now that they have this person going in between. And Princess Mononoke's character is not necessarily a true wolf, and she's not, but she was never raised by humans either. So, her and the main character, I can't remember his name, have this good middle ground. Again, Princess Mononoke does a lot of stuff that is very heavy and interesting, and it really is a timeless message that it really makes you think. And I loved it. Miyazaki is just a pro at having these movies not have characters that back down from who they are. They might learn and adapt and understand, but they're not going to just bend over because, oh well, it's the end of the movie, dude. It's like, no, they kind of have to earn their the trust back and this and that. It's an important message to have, because I think a lot of people think that things, I don't want to say black or white. I don't want to say that, but they always want to see stuff that has a clean ending, and they think that, oh well, if you show stuff that and you see that one side is one way or whatever, that they're gonna magically agree with you or something. And it's like, no, it's not that clean. And I think Princess Mononoke is one of those perfect movies that shows, just because we got to the end of the movie and the big conflict is resolved, it doesn't mean that both sides are going to be buddy buddy anymore. They can still have shit going on, because there has been no proof that they have fully changed or understood what was really going on. So I like that a lot about Princess Mononoke, that it takes what Nausicaa was doing and it elaborated more on the aspect of hate that comes from it, and it really shows this cycle that goes on, and eventually we're gonna have to break that hate, and maybe Princess Mononoke and the guy, whatever, are gonna be the characters that are gonna do that. We don't know, because it's uncertain. So Princess Mononoke is very strong in that regard. It's really it's another one of my favorites that he has put out. So it's a very solid movie. I would recommend Princess Mononoke if you haven't seen it. It's a very, very, very good movie. Kiki's Delivery Service is a movie that would be on Disney Channel from time to time, and I never really sat and watched all of it. I saw only the beginning, and then I'd either lose interest, or it would be going into time either into Dragon Ball Z or Tenchi Universe that I'd be much more interested in watching at that time. But I finally got a chance to see it from start to finish, and man, this movie really, really struck a chord with me. This is really one of the movies that I didn't think would be so high up for me in terms of Miyazaki films. It really like tied with Nausicaa in some ways, because Kiki's Delivery Service has a very simple plot to a degree, but I think what I loved about it was that it was more relatable for me, because it deals a lot with uh, people who might not have the strongest motivations, or might not fully know what they're doing. They might not know, what am I doing this for, and they go through process of blocks, of ruts, and all this kind of stuff. And Kiki's Delivery Service is brilliant. It's brilliant with this structure, with how it tells it. So it starts off with like Kiki coming of age, and she goes off to do some study with witchery and all that kind of shit. So she becomes a delivery service, which is interesting because I was kind of sitting there expecting if she, because I knew it was obviously delivery service. It's in the title, but I was like, what's so witchery about delivering stuff? So it was just kind of a weird thing, but it worked in the grand scheme of things for this movie. I think also with Kiki's Delivery Service, as much as with any other Miyazaki film, it has a very strong cast of characters that are very memorable. Like, I really like Kiki as a character. She's this very go-getting character that really wants to kind of prove herself to the world and really show that she is a witch and she can do stuff. So I do like that she's a very like excited character, and she goes off and she's just trying to do her best. And then the part that really stuck with me was the part where she couldn't fly anymore, she couldn't talk to her cat anymore. A lot of stuff that she used to do naturally, she couldn't do it, and she was just like depressed. She was like, "What am I even doing? I don't even know. Maybe I'm not good enough. Whatever." And she visits this painter, this artist, and she's like, "Yeah, maybe what you need to do is take a break. And look, when I go through stuff where I can't draw or paint anymore, and I just feel like I'm going through a block, I just stop what I'm doing and I just relax, walk around, take a break, and all this kind of stuff." And you know, Kiki starts to enjoy life a little bit more at this time after that, because she's like, yeah, maybe I am stressing out more and more, and I'm just not really focusing on my own stuff going on. And then she starts getting her stuff back once she sees a friend in jeopardy, in danger, and that kind of forces her to get herself out of this funk. Uh, and it makes her believe in herself, because more and more as she's doing that, as she's trying to lift off, more and more people start to like chant for her. They get excited, they get pumped, and I really like that a lot with Kiki's Delivery Service. It kind of reminded me a lot of Little Witch Academia, a show from Trigger, which is also another great show, by the way. It shows that there is some degree of some kind of like out public belief that can go into witchery and magic and all this kind of stuff, but it kind of motivated her to keep trying, and I love that, because I think one of the things that you never really learn in life. No one really tells you when you're growing up that life is gonna be like super hard. I mean, obviously life is hard, and everyone faces challenges in some degree, depending on where you are. Some people have it easier than others, whatever. But the one thing that they don't tell you, even in the realms of creation, of art, whatever, you get to a point where for me, guys, when I do art, there are just days where I'm just trying to draw, and nothing I'm drawing looks good, and I can't get over it. I just, no matter how hard I try and this and that, and I realize, and for a while I never really figured out how to get around it. And every time I would see someone talk about it on Twitter or just anywhere, they would never give you a straight answer. There's all these other ways that people have coped with it. Some people say, oh, take breaks. Some say just keep drawing, keep working on it, keep moving, and this and that. But not everything will work for you. And with Kiki, like, she tries so many things to kind of get out of it. And not even, I mean, to a degree, not even what the artist was telling her was helping her. uh, she had to really kind of, get into this sense of like motivation, because I think to a point in this movie she wasn't, because she did one delivery and she was trying to get to a party and she couldn't make it. So I think at that point she started to feel like, what am I doing this for? And she started to not really believe in herself. And by the end, when her friend was in jeopardy, she was kind of forced to start to believe in herself, and everyone else was kind of motivating her. And it was very emotional. Like, kind of thinking about this, it was really kind of like, damn, because this is something that is like paramount with anything you do. And I'm sure I'd say with art, this has been going on. I feel like that could be used with any profession. Like, you could be doing med school, like you could be doing anything, and you might be doing something, and you might say like, what am I doing this classwork for? Like, what's the point? Like, I don't know. Like, it's the same shit. Like, you might be like studying very hard and you get a bad grade, and you have to deal with that shit. And I think this movie deals a lot with that, and it shows like sometimes you just need to believe in yourself. You need people to motivate you to say you can do it. Look, persevere, push, push, push. And this is stuff that like I feel like when you're growing up, you never learn that. You pick up on it. Sure, maybe someone will tell you this when you're getting older, but I don't think a lot of shows really do a good job teaching it. There's some episodes that some shows that might have an episode or two about it, but I think Kiki really is a better movie to show because it really shows uh, the phases and the arcs to it. And the thing I just love about Kiki is that it's such a toned down. It's not as toned down as a certain movie we'll get into later, but it's a very grounded Miyazaki film in the sense that uh, it doesn't really have a villain at all. Like it's a very like slice of life kind of movie, and with that, I think it allowed them to do these very cool flying scenes. A lot of the flying scenes looked really rad. Like the beginning when she's starting to fly, where she's flying into trees and she bounces off walls near the end. All that kind of shit. It's just gorgeous to see that being animated. And I can definitely tell that that's probably where a lot of the time was spent. Not that there's weak parts of the animation any part of the movie, but with a story like this, I feel like you could save a lot of budget because there's no fight scenes, there's no action stuff that you're animating here. So I really like that with Kiki's Delivery Service, that it just takes its time to really show uh, a slice of life of this witch that's just trying to go somewhere with what she's doing, and she kind of fell into a delivery service kind of profession. Like she didn't even know what to do. Like she left and was like, "Oh shit, I left home. I don't know what to do. I can't do potions. I'm not good with that. I don't know." And then she was like, "Oh, I guess I'll do delivery." And then that's what she's been doing. So I do like that the main character didn't even know what she wanted to do when she left. She just wanted to do something, but she didn't know what. And then she fell into something, and she was just kind of doing it, and she was doing stuff. I like that a lot. I think that is just a very uh, a good story beat to follow, because I think at the end of the day, the other thing that is important to know is that not everyone knows what they want to do with their life. A lot of times, a lot of movies and shows and school, all this stuff, they always tell you need to know what you're doing with your life all the time. You need to have a plan, and there's nothing wrong with that either. I mean, the movie doesn't like villainize that, but it also shows that you might not know what to do, but something's gonna fall in your lap and it's gonna click. Sometimes you have to keep trying stuff, and eventually something that you might not even think about might just kind of snap, and you say, "Yes, that's what I want to do." So that's really what I think Prisma No. Whoops, I said the wrong movie. Kiki's Delivery Service really did in terms of storytelling and what it was trying to tell the viewer. And I think it's a very personal movie too. That's why I think I hold it with so high regard. It was like it's really Tyler Nowska, which I didn't really think it was gonna be. When I started watching, I was like, I don't know, it's kind of whatever. And then as the movie went on, I was like, I think I like this movie. Like I'm already itching to rewatch that movie. And my principle when I watch stuff, when I watch a movie, play a video game, whatever, if I get an itch to rewatch it or to replay it, that to me is a sign that it is doing something good, that it makes me want to re-experience it. There's exceptions or whatever, but you know I rarely think about like replaying or rewatching stuff that either was okay to me. So Kiki's Delivery Service is really up there for me. That's another movie I highly recommend. It's just a fantastic movie that he put out. And I think this was another one that was not so much early, but it was like probably like early mid of his career. Like it was around that time where he was just getting known in the West. I think what really set him over was Princess Mononoke. I think that one and My Neighbor Totoro were the two major films. And Kiki's Delivery Service, I think, was. I feel like that was an intermediary movie. I think that came between those two, or it might even be before Totoro. But I think, it was around that time where Miyazaki was starting to get noticed globally. in his career. So it was starting making waves. Let's just say, but it was around that era with him. So I think that's probably why it was another slice of life kind of story. But it was a very good one too. At that, I really liked Kiki's Delivery Service. It's really one of my favorite movies. Just iconic characters in it. I mean, I say iconic in this, but all of his movies have iconic characters. I think the only one that I would say is a little bit weak would be Castle in the Sky. I think has weak, iconic characters to a degree, but even then, that's a solid movie in its own right. But yeah, Kiki's Delivery Service is just a movie I would say it's a definite must see. If you're going through his filmography, I would definitely recommend Kiki for sure. The other movie I have watched in this Miyazaki film marathon was Spirited Away. This movie was another film that I missed, but that was again during an era where I really wasn't appreciative of movies, or I mean I don't want to say I wasn't appreciative of Miyazaki films because that would not be true. I think when I was younger, I've said this earlier in this review, I'm sure, but I feel like when I was younger, when I was watching his movies, Miyazaki has such a very uh, different pacing with his films. I think a lot of his films are written in a way that are very mature. They don't patronize. They don't dumb down anything. So I think when I was young, I was just like, this is good, but I'm gonna fall asleep. It was a weird time for me when I was young. I had a weird sense of taste. But watching Spirited Away now, I loved this film. This was another film that was up there in my favorites because it does more than just have an interesting story and characters. The set pieces, the locations are just jaw dropping. The bathhouse that the movie takes place in is so like unique. Like you would think if a movie took place in one building, you would just kind of get sick of it. But it is like gorgeous to look in, and a lot of people like look at animation as it's just for kids and it's just little silly stuff, whatever. But Spirited Away really shows that you can use the animation as a medium to really show things you would not be able to show with live action. Like you can't just go to this bathhouse that exists in this movie and it is memorable, like the locations and the stuff you see. But I think the other thing that I loved about Spirited Away was the concept of No Face. No Face is a character that isn't. I mean, again, as with most Miyazaki films, the villain in this film isn't necessarily traditional. It's not this a super evil, like, oh, I'm gonna fuck people's days up kind of villain. It's more of like a villain out of necessity or just out of circumstance. We'll get into like one of the villains, but No Face was this character that was portrayed initially as ominous. Like you don't know what this character is. You see him in the background, just chilling around, and Chihiro lets him in to the bathhouse through a window, and as it's going on, you see that No Face might have some like some greedy intentions, and to a point, I feel like No Face is a defining being of the seven sins. Lust. I mean, maybe not so much lust. Well, no, I guess technically you could argue lust for Chihiro, I guess, or lust for attention. Greed, envy, gluttony, or is gluttony greed? No, greed is its own thing. Gluttony. I keep forgetting a lot of these. Lust, greed, envy, gluttony, rage. I think is one. I think. Uh, I can't remember the other. It was a seven or it's five. Maybe I'm like tripping on this, but you know what I mean. He goes through all this stuff, and I think the other thing with No Face is that it kind of mimics Chihiro to a point, because in the beginning of the movie, Chihiro is a very introverted character, selfish, uh, nervous, and afraid, and she also feels kind of lonely because her family was moving. She had all these friends at this one school, and she hated the new school she's going to be going to, and she felt very alone and afraid. And she goes through this adventure. in this movie that kind of breaks her out of her shell, and she starts getting more brave and assertive, and she's not as selfish or bratty as she was at the beginning. And it's kind of a good like growing story for her. And No Face, I think, was another character that kind of allowed her to kind of uh, learn, because he sure he wanted a friend and he just wanted to please someone, but what he was doing was not only hurting her and everyone else around him, it was also hurting himself because he wasn't understanding people's feelings as much, so he wasn't really growing as anyone should. So eventually, they go off to meet up with Yababa's twin sister, and after that, he starts to understand like I can't go on being like this, and he finds a place and he's happy by the end. And around that time is when Chihiro kind of comes around to say like, yeah, maybe I should be more accepting of what's going on in my life, etc. And through this, she meets a dragon. It was named after some river. It's like not Nakahiko, whatever. I don't remember the guy's name. The dragon dude. That was like Yababa's second-hand man, right-hand man dude. What I liked about him as well was that he was kind of a misunderstood character that was another victim of Yababa's kind of contract kind of deal. Now Yababa, now to go back to what I said, that this movie doesn't have a traditional villain. I don't necessarily consider Yababa to be 100% evil. I don't think that she's obviously not a hero, but what she does in the movie is kind of out of necessity of what she's doing. She wants to run this bathhouse, and really nothing there is free. You have to pay all this kind of stuff, and all the stuff that she's doing is a product of that. And she didn't initially want to have this contract with Chihiro because she's like, I have so much to keep track of. I don't really need anyone else to like kind of look over until she was like forced to give her a contract. But a lot of the stuff that she was doing was just more out of what's going on. So I wouldn't necessarily say Yababa is evil, but she's just kind of like this, like opportunist, I would say, because she took this opportunity of like, yeah, Chihiro's a employee now. I don't know why would I want to get rid of her. I'm gonna just use her the whole time. I mean, I could use her to kind of put more labor out there, etc. So that's why she kind of gave her this weak ass bet at the end, which is like nice. I mean, you kind of knew how that was gonna end as well, because like I was sitting there thinking to myself, none of them are her parents, and like, yeah, none of these are my parents. And she's like, what? Oh, you're right. And she does get her comeuppance to a point, but I think what Spirited Away does well, just like Kiki's Delivery Service, is that it's a great coming of age story that really shows a character growth with it, and I really love that about this movie. I do think that the animation and the set pieces are a little bit stronger than the story. I don't think the story was bad or weak at all, but I think the animation of it was really what held it up the most. But I liked a lot of the characters as well. I mean, they all held the movie together. I think Spirited Away, like all those other movies, have a lot of working parts that give it a synergy to it. So, I do also recommend this movie. I mean, I'll be honest with you guys. I recommend all his movies, obviously, but Spirited Away is really one of my favorites as well. I don't know if I would put it up there as high as Kiki or Nausicaa, but it's up there. It's something like my third favorite, if anything. But it's really solid of a film that I really do think about from time to time. So, if anything, No Face is really the spirit I really loved. I loved No Face's design. The concept of him was really cool. I really liked it. I really liked No Face. So that was rad. That was rad. I liked all that stuff. All that stuff really helped the movie move. So of course I'm going to talk about My Neighbor Totoro. This is one of the most iconic Miyazaki films. If you ask anyone, I'm sure they know of it, or have seen the image of it, or the guy, the Totoro dude. This movie is a really solid movie. I think it's either it's tied for second favorite with Princess Mononoke for sure, but with Totoro, I think what I liked about it a lot is that it doesn't do any cheap tricks. Like, it doesn't, go to the route of like, oh yeah, the mom's gonna die. now they're sad, right? It's like no, it ends with a very hopeful ending, but it goes through all this like these emotional swings where you have the older sister that is kind of assuming the role of their mom for the most part. Like she kind of has to do that. Well, the dad's single, and of course she's a kid as well, but she's still kind of stressed out over this. So once they're told like, oh yeah, your mom is having a cold again, and can't come home this weekend, and she's like, and she can't like hold it in. She's just like, we've heard this so many times. She has to be dead. She must be dying at this point. She starts to really feel the gravity and the weight of that. Because you hear all these bad news constantly to the point where um you start fearing the worst. And she's like, I don't know what else I'm gonna do. I mean, it's gonna be very hard and this and that. And it is a very like rough scene to go through, in my opinion. Like it was just very hard because it was just uh, rough to see. And then you have like the other scene that I think was either before or after that part where they were waiting for their dad to come home, and they go to the bus stop to wait for him, and the bus comes, the bus goes, and he never shows up, and you start to say to yourself, oh shit, did something happen to him too? Like you really start to feel like you feel the worst almost. But this is also being accompanied by Totoro, a forest spirit in this movie, and I think like what they use Totoro in this movie is very balanced. Like they use it in a way to be pretty much comic relief. Like it's not it's supposed to break up the drama of this movie, and it does it in a way that's tasteful. It's not like anything that's out of in bad taste or whatever. It comes in when you need it. So like when they're waiting for their dad and they start to realize he might not be coming home because something bad might be happening, Totoro shows up. I mean, he showed up earlier in the movie as well when they were planting trees and all that kind of stuff. But he comes back at this part on to show this like cat bus and all this kind of stuff, and it's to show the some promise of that. And this comes to be a running vehicle with the story. So it does a good job kind of having this dual story going on with the mother in the hospital, how this family is dealing with it, and the respect with the forest, to plant trees and all this other stuff. And it teaches that too. And they never feel like one is getting more screen time than the other either. It does a good job balancing these two messages out where it feels like it's perfect. Uh, the thing where the movie starts to build up is, when the younger sister is told of the news that the mom can't come home because she's sick, the younger sister doesn't understand really the gravity of it, so she starts saying like, that's unfair, she should come home and this and that, like any child would do. And the older sister, being stressed out, you snapped at her because you're like, you can't like get your way. She has to stay in the hospital. She can't come home and this and that. She has to be there and this and that. So she yells at her sister. She gets like sad and runs away. And of course, the older sister realizes that maybe she shouldn't have yelled at her. Sure, but at the same time, she was coming from a place of like being very stressed out and all that kind of shit going on. So I do like that it has this like, I mean, this one literally does not have a villain in it either, but it has this tension going on that's kind of being built up subtle, like through subtle stuff throughout the movie. I think Totoro is a very nice somber movie that doesn't treat the audience like they're babies. So it's like, okay, yeah, this is going on, and it's fascinating. It's a very good movie in that sense, and it really delves into these ideas and stories very well, and it's a good layer too. It's not super depressing, dark either. Like this is, I feel like Totoro could be shown at like a younger age as well. Like probably the same age around Ponyo age, pretty much. But Totoro is a very solid film in that regard. I do love it a lot with its creativity. It's a very unique movie. With Spirited Away, it showed a lot of these visual creativity with the spirits and all that kind of stuff, while Totoro shows more creativity with balancing a somber story with something a little bit more whimsical, and how they both bounce off each other. very well. So I do think that Totoro is a very good movie for it being a depressing movie that has a very uplifting ending that ends on a promise of hope and optimism. So it's a very nice movie to kind of experience with it. I saw this movie when I was like 5 or 6. I was very young. Okay, I was very young. I know that much. And I was watching it at a friend's house when he had a sleepover, and I ended up falling asleep during it. So that's very unfortunate. That one and Princess Mononoke was the two movies I ended up falling asleep in during. So that's unfortunate. Those two movies are very good, and I, as a kid, fell asleep during them. But I loved them. I love them now. So there you go. Sound good? Porco Rosso was a film I completely missed. This one I really have not heard anyone talk about. I've heard people talk about Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, Kiki, Princess Mononoke, Ponyo, etc. But I have not heard anyone mention Porco Rosso a lot. So I feel like that is a very underrated movie or underappreciated because when I watched this movie, I truly loved it. This one is like my first or second favorite Miyazaki film because it had a very good story with it. I loved the anti-war message it was having, where it has this character Porco. His real name is Marco, but people call him Porco because he's a pig. But this character Porco who fought in World War I, and he saw so many people die, and he ran off. He ran away. Um, and because of that, that probably is what gave him the curse of being a pig. They never really explain why he's a pig. They allude to it. They kind of they only tell you that it was a curse. They never explain why or how he got it. And I like that they didn't explain how. Well, they just say he got turned to a pig because it was some kind of curse. And you heard some glimpses of his past that is meant to kind of allude that his actions led him to be a pig because he has his own self. He put himself before anyone else like a pig. So I do like that they kind of had this subtle like character trait that is both visually told and told just by through his actions. Like they keep making jokes about how he's pig headed and he's such a pig and this and that, but he's a character that has seen so much death that he just kind of doesn't really care what happens. It's like he didn't want to fight in a war anymore after that, and he was because what it probably was when he was young, he probably was like good at flying and he want and all that kind of stuff, but he didn't see the cost of it. The other thing I really really loved with Porco Rosso was the contrasting uh, tones with the locations. The area he's in kind of portrays these space pirates, well, sky pirates, I'll call them, as like these bumbling oafs, and everyone there's like, oh, they kidnapped 15 kids again, and it's like, and that's where it starts off with. The first thing you see in this movie is this kidnapping, and everyone there that's like, all these kids are being kidnapped, and all the kids are like, oh, we're getting kidnapped, guys, whoa, and it's like this goofy thing that happens. And then, you see Porco Rosso being called in to save the kids. He goes in for a prize. He stops the pirates. He saves the kids. And it's like this like goofy like scene that's just played up like it's like a sporting event almost. And then eventually in the movie he goes to Italy to get his plane fixed. And there it's like depressing, World War II. I think this is around the period of World War II almost, pretty much. They have like the fascists there. They're just like it's like a miserable tone almost. And he's like watching a movie with his old friend that's part of the army there, and it has one of like these scenes where he's talking to him, and he's like, and he's like, oh man, doesn't this like being a pig or something? And he tells him, much rather be a pig than a fascist, and that is just a great quote, I tell you. But I really loved that movie just for that tone in its own way, where it just kind of shows the outside world as this miserable place, but this one place that has these space pirates and his own little secret island area, whatever. It's all like goofy, uplifting, and this and that. But the thing that really makes Porco Rosso strong as a movie is the bond that he gets with. Oh my god, This sucks. I knew the name for a while, and now I forgot it. It's like I'm so bad with names. It's like G something J something. This is gonna fucking bother me. I'm gonna just look up characters. Damn it. I think it's like Gina. Gina. I knew it was with a G. Damn it. Gina. Gina. And Porgo has this great relationship where, they're like ex-lovers or secret lovers. I think Gina was the one that loved Marco, and Marco's like, I don't know about that. While you also have the engineering daughter, I can't remember her name either, and I just saw the character list. Whoops. But oh, Theo. Jeez, that's a little bit of a more memorable name, Theo. Um, so you have that as well, and Theo, I think, was like this vessel of Marco really starting to show like a more human side of him, because they show like more that they kind of establish that Marco is very selfish of a character. He only cares for his own well being. He's a bounty hunter. He only went out to save those kids to get paid, pretty much. Otherwise, he wouldn't really care. But Porco Rosso is a very selfish character. He doesn't really care. He didn't care about the bounty hunters. He didn't care about how they felt. They have this American guy that came in and was like, oh yeah, fuck you, Porco. And he's like, I don't give a shit. I'm just gonna do my thing, be left alone, whatever. And then Theo gets involved with his life because she wants to really be there for flying the plane to see how it flies, etc. And then she kind of has this wager with the American guy, and she's like, hey, look, if you lose to Porco, I'll marry you. But no. If you lose the Porco, if Porco wins, Jesus, I don't know why. If Porco wins, he would have to pay them a lot of money, and then if the other guy wins and Porco loses, uh, she would have to marry this Western American guy. So after that, like this act of chivalry, you kind of see that Marco started to kind of get his humanity back, and there's flashes of it too. Like they don't really stick with one or the other. So there's a scene where where she's going to bed and he's counting his bullets or whatever, and as he's as he's doing that, he reverted back to his human form. And the second that Theo noticed that, he turns back into a pig because he's probably back to his old ways, whatever. But at the end, it comes back into play where he wins, and Theo doesn't have to marry the guy. They get all that money, etc. He did all of that for her, and he really cared about all that shit that's been going on. He turned back to human. Allegedly, like they alluded to that because the camera pans out and you don't really see his face, but you see the American guy freaking out like, "Oh my god, dude, let me see your face! Let me see your face!" So you already know that he kind of turned back into a human. And then after that, you get this narration from Theo, kind of explaining what happened with everyone after the events, and it was never made clear if Porco turned back to human, if he stayed as a pig. They kept that vague. And they also kept vague the bet that Gina had, because she was wanting her true love to show up in the garden, once again, and all that kind of stuff. And it's alluded and strongly hinted that her true love was Porco. So it ends with them saying like, well, who showed up in the garden? Well, that'll be our little secret. So it's alluded that it was Porco, or it could be Theo. You never know. But it's alleged that it was that because he returned back to human, because he never really said what happened to him completely. That was a complete mystery. Like you thought they would, but they never really gave it any clear-cut answer, which I liked. I liked that Porco Rosso had such a great ending. And it doesn't have as I said with most of Miyazaki's films, there's no like hardcore traditional villain. I mean, unless you want to count the fascists, but I mean, come on. Because the Western guy didn't have any bad blood with Porco. He was just kind of trying to prove a point with them and to be the best. And Porco and the bounty hunters are not really enemies. I mean, they're antagonists to a point, but they're just kind of like at this point, all this stuff feels like they're just rivals at this point. There's nothing like malice out of it. Because even then, like they played this western as just this goofy guy that just kind of came around, and it wasn't like this fucking guy got kill him, guys. And that's really what I like about Porco Rosso, and a lot of Miyazaki's films. Like they deal a lot of good storytelling that don't boil down to a good guy versus bad guy scenario, and it's just fantastic. Porco Rosso has a lot of good stuff in it that is very very subtle. Like the anti-war stuff is very subtle to a point. Like sure, you could say it's not super subtle, but like it's not a central focus. Like they don't really spend a lot of time in Italy to really show the fascists there. I mean, they come back into the story by the end, but that's not the central vehicle of the story. Uh, and by the end, they kind of unified the American and Porco to fight against them pretty much. So it was a nice um, story that was just this kind of fun time that really was enjoyable. I really liked Porco Rosso, and I kind of feel like no one talks a lot about it. Like, every time I see people talk about Miyazaki, they talk about like the obvious ones like Princess Mononoke, Howl's Moving Castle, My Neighbor Totoro, and all this stuff, but no one talks about Porco Rosso. And I'll say this honestly, I feel like Howl's Moving Castle is kind of overrated. I feel like in high school, everyone was telling me how great that movie was. Oh my god, guys, Howl's Moving Castle, what an amazing movie! And it's one of his weakest. But Porco Rosso has so many cool, like, parts of it. Like, that has great animation. Like, again, any animation, any movie, show, game, what have you, is about something I do not like. I do not like plane fights. I never thought them to be interesting. It's like, okay, cool, I guess the fucking planes fight each other. I don't really care, whatever. Same with mech anime, whatever. But when I see shows like movies like Porco Rosso that get me invested with it and get me like glued to the movie, and like Kiki's Delivery Service, this one I'm already itching to rewatch again. And it really shows how good this movie is. The fact that I was able to turn on something I thought I would dislike because I don't like this type of thing just shows how strong of a movie it is. And I feel like it's really no attention. Out of all his movies he put out, this one I feel like gets no attention from anyone. So I definitely would highly recommend Porco Rosso. It's such a strong movie. Michael Keaton is such a good VA for Porco Rosso, man. Such a good movie. I highly recommend Porco Rosso if you haven't seen it. It is such a good movie. I can't recommend it enough. So the last movie in this special review video is The Wind Rises. If you were to ask me how does this rank to the other Miyazaki films, I kind of put it in a league of its own because this one honestly is such a drastic change or difference for Miyazaki. It has some of the same key themes for Miyazaki's films, sure, but it's different in the sense that it doesn't use any fantasy to tell the story. It's based on a true event, or based on true events that happened during World War II or so with this plane maker. This guy who made planes, he fell in love with this woman who had, I think it's tuberculosis. TB. So she has that, and it's about his love with her and all this kind of stuff. And it is a very somber movie. There's really nothing like exciting that happens. There's nothing very fantasy that happens. Everything that happens is very somber, and to a point, I would compare it to My Neighbor Totoro in that regard because they have a lot of like emotional beats to it. And I guess you would say that the Totoro moment, the Totoro factor in The Wind Rises would be the dream events, when he would be going off dreaming about meeting his dream plane makers, etc. That's like the only thing where you kind of delve into fantasy with this film, but overall it's still a very somber story about a guy who makes planes that loves his wife and loves making planes and all this stuff. And this was a movie when I watched it. I don't know why. I didn't know what I was expecting initially when I watched it in theaters. This was the only, and keep in mind, this was the only Miyazaki film I saw in theaters. And I thought like I'd kind of be bored because I think this was also around the time that There Will Be Blood came out, and that movie kind of really put me to sleep, unfortunately. And I watched that movie now. I loved it, but The Wind Rises is such a good movie. I think it stands on its own as a very good drama. You really feel for the sense of love for these two characters, and I'm not major into a lot of romance movies. I'm not big on romance and that kind of shit, but The Wind Rises is such a good job. You know, give me these two characters that you just want to see get together and all this kind of stuff, and see how he falls in love with plane making and this and that. I think The Wind Rises goes back to what Miyazaki kind of inserts in his movies, where he wants to have these movies have some creative inspiration for people. Like you could find something that's inspirational. Like a lot of his movies delves with inspirational things, and The Wind Rises is a celebration of that. And this was a movie that was supposed to mark his retirement too, so it plays into a lot of stuff that is kind of a like to a point. I think The Wind Rises was a great movie for him to end on, to end his career on, because it was a very somber film that was about love and passion, making things you love and loving things in your life and all this stuff. It goes through all of that and losing that too, and I think that was intentional with his career, because he loved, obviously he loved what he did. He loved the craftsmanship he had, and all the movies he put out, and I think he kind of put that into he kind of related that to the love for this guy and his wife, and everything is temporal, everything's temporary, and eventually you're gonna have to say goodbye to it. And this character, he married this woman knowing that he's gonna eventually have to say goodbye to her, because at the time TB was like a death sentence for people. Uh, and he knew he was gonna have to say goodbye. So it was just about the moment of doing the stuff that he loved while she was there, and then saying goodbye. And I think that he did this movie because that's how he felt with his career. Like he loved what he did, but eventually he's gonna have to retire, and sometimes he has to say goodbye. Now, of course, he is going back into making movies. The next movie got delayed. It was How Do You Live? And that one was supposed to come out this year, and now it's pushed back like 2, 3 years. So we'll see. But that movie's gonna mark his return from retirement. So that's interesting. I'm excited for that as it is. But The Wind Rises is such a somber film. I would recommend that as well. I would also say it might be stronger of a movie if you watch that movie last. But it is a very good movie. It was really one of my favorites, and it lasted. I really owe a lot to that movie. The Wind Rises inspired me to really go back and really, really, really give Miyazaki, a bigger chance, because at that time, after The Wind Rises and before it, obviously, I always appreciated Miyazaki's work. I saw Howl's Moving Castle in high school. I was like, oh yeah, this is a cool like looking movie. I love the animation and art style, but I never really took the time to watch his other films. But The Wind Rises, the moment I saw that movie, I was like, I gotta watch his other films. I have to now. This movie is so fucking rad, and I love the animation, and I really owe a lot of thanks to that movie, and that's really why I wanted to save The Wind Rises as the last movie I'd cover in this special video of On Spot Review. I wanted to go through all of them. Initially, I wanted to kind of go through like my least favorite to favorite, most favorite, whatever, and ranking them, but when I was watching them initially, I kept tweeting about it too. I cannot rank these movies. I can tell you what movies I did not like them. I think were my least favorite, sure, but I can't rank them like on a number scale, because a lot of them tied with each other, and so that to me shows the strength of Miyazaki as a filmmaker. You see, Howl's Moving Castle, sure, it's a weak film, but it has a lot of stuff that makes Miyazaki a very like a visionary in the craft and the medium. He was doing a lot of stuff that not a lot of people were doing. So I really love doing this video and watching all these films I didn't get to experience in the past as much. And I really appreciate a lot of his work way more, because I think, it's a very interesting way he made these movies. He treated all these movies like they were being that they're for like some level of maturity. So I really loved Ghibli's movies, Miyazaki's films. So that's it for my review for all his films. And maybe in the future I'll go off and talk about other films made by the studio itself. So that'll be another video for another time. This was specifically talking about Miyazaki's films. Thank you for watching. Hope to see you next time.